Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem Haddad, for leading us off this morning. Thank you, Representative, for bringing Denim Day here to our State House, and to each and every one of you for being here, especially the House members who were debating and reaching conclusion on your budget into the late hours last night, and to our Senate members as well. We're here to stand up and make a statement today that Massachusetts will do everything that we can together with advocates, with our legislative colleagues here and others in this building, with our administration, to reduce the amount of violence in people's lives, women, children, and families, to break out of the cycle of violence so that they can live in peace and comfort here in our Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I am proud and honored to stand with these women today. I'm proud and honored to be the chair of our Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Council, and I want to recognize some of the individuals on that council who are here today. And I also just want to recognize that there are strength in numbers, that we have women in our Women's Caucus, obviously, members of our legislature, members of this advisory council who are working statewide to introduce policies and initiatives to reduce the amount of violence here in our Commonwealth around the area of domestic violence and sexual assault. We have Laurie Myers here, who is the director of SORB. Maureen Gallagher from Jane Doe, who will be receiving the proclamation today. Obviously, Michelle Laranja is always known to us and doing a great job, and thank you for coming to be here as well. Stacy Malone from the Victims' Right Law Center, and Chris Glaskin from MOVA. Thank you, Representative, for coming. So a lot of the work that we do, you probably don't read about on the front page of the news or hear it on TV, but it's really important work that all of us collectively are doing. I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight some of the things that the Advisory Council has accomplished and is working on currently here with all of you. Actually, the Advisory Council has its anniversary date actually 2 years tomorrow, and in our 2 years, we've gotten a lot of stuff done. Governor Baker was proud to sign the executive order just 2 years ago, and I'm proud to chair it as my friend and mentor, Paul Salucci, started this council more than 20 years ago, and for us to be able to bring it to full power and focus on these initiatives is really important. Our council has met 11 times since its formation in these past 2 years, and we have 5 working groups that are comprised of advisory council members and members of the public that can serve in these work groups to help us reach the right conclusions on policies and initiatives that are important in this space. The 5 work groups are response and assessment, housing stability and self-sufficiency, human trafficking, particularly as it relates to children in our Commonwealth, engaging our veterans and military families around how to reduce violence as these families transition back to civilian life, and prevention education. We can't do enough across the landscape of Massachusetts to bring awareness and an understanding of what our culture needs to be and should be here in our Commonwealth around these issues. Let me do my top 10, and I'll do them quickly, but they're really important things for all of us to talk about because we've all worked on them together. 1 year ago, Secretary Bennett and Colonel McCune launched a new high-risk unit of the Massachusetts State Police, and we've asked Lieutenant Detective Pi Downsborough to head this human trafficking unit as it intersects with vulnerable children in our Commonwealth. They are doing an incredible job to make sure that we're identifying these victims, wrapping around the services that they need, and tamping down on the amount of trafficking here in our Commonwealth. And of course, the Attorney General is also doing an incredible job in this space. Last October, we worked with all of you in making sure that we can now have rape kits preserved for the same amount of years that the statute of limitations exists, 15 years in our Commonwealth, and we are building out the facility, the storage needed for these rape kits to be available as evidence here in our Commonwealth. Thank you to all of my colleagues standing here today for your work on that very important initiative. And in March, this is an important one that I felt passionate about, and so did the governor, in making sure that our municipal police departments have a standard way of responding to a victim's call. We have prepared a response tool regarding domestic violence and strangulation calls and how to respond. We announced just last month that we're piloting this program in Greenfield, Foxborough, Woburn, and Quincy. We'll perfect this model and hopefully scale it to all the municipal police departments across our Commonwealth so that our police officers have the right tools in response to that victim when she or he needs help in our Commonwealth. Number 4, we have an amazing team of SANE nurses. These are the sexual assault nurse examiners. We have approximately 150 of them certified in our Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they are now located in every single county of our Commonwealth, and the newest sites being Weymouth, Fall River, and Framingham. Number 5, the Department of Children and Families has revised their protective intake policy to include sexual exploitation and human trafficking as a reportable matter in their office, and they've trained over 100 staff to be specialists on this topic. Number 6, DCF is also working with the Justice Resource Institute, My Life, My Choice program at the Suffolk County Child Advocacy Center to pilot an innovative data system that will collect more comprehensive information about youth who may be involved with human trafficking. Data is very important. A lot of these matters go unreported, but if we can collect the data, we can do a better job in our response. Number 7, the council worked with all of you to reform the domestic violence and sexual assault shelter and community services response. As a victim of domestic violence, you do not have to make yourself homeless and enter the shelter system to get the services that you need, and the legislature worked in partnership with us to make that happen through our budget last year. I want to thank you all for that as well. Number 8, the Department of Higher Education, and I know this is a very important topic for the work group of the Women's Caucus, did its first of the kind report to focus on campus sexual assault policies and protocols and best practices. We have more work to do in this area, and we will work on this together. And just yesterday, we teamed up with our district attorneys across our Commonwealth, and specifically DA Conley and the Youth Advisory Council of Suffolk County that he works with, to file legislation concerning sexually explicit images here in the Commonwealth, and giving our district attorneys more tools to work with to do what's appropriate when there's peer-to-peer sexting, but also additional tools for those individuals who take it to another level and intend to harm someone by disseminating explicit images that are not voluntarily consented to. We look forward to working with all of you and hopefully the passage of that bill in the very near future. And finally, I want to today make a proclamation, because this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And while we claim this month to be dedicated to this particular issue, every day we need to work hard as legislators, as your Lieutenant Governor, as advocates, and people concerned in this community around this topic to do our part. Because in Massachusetts, our Department of Public Health reported that 1,895 incidents of sexual assault were reported to rape crisis centers across our Commonwealth. Behind every single one of those numbers is a woman or an individual or a child who has been put in harm's way. Young people experienced heightened rates of sexual assault, and youth ages between 12 and 17 are 2.5 times greater to be victimized by rape or sexual assault. And on our colleges and university campuses here in our Commonwealth, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted. We can do better, right? As much as we have accomplished together, we have more work to do. So it is with honor that I stand with all of you in camaraderie and in solidarity to make sure that we continue our efforts to build a Commonwealth that is stronger and better to protect all of her citizens. With that, I want to present to Jane Doe our proclamation making the month of April Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, signed by our Governor Charlie Baker and proudly your Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito.
So now I'd like to introduce somebody who is an amazing partner to me. We've been working together now for close to 17. It's the beginning of the 17th year. And Representative Poria is the highest-ranking woman in the Republican caucus. But she is by far one of the gentlest women that I know. And she has been instrumental for the last several years in making sure that the Bristol County Children's Advocacy Center has been recognized in the budget. Yes, that's absolutely. And it's funny because when little things go wrong in the inside the house, very often Betty and I come together to make sure that things are taken care of, and people realize that some of the things they do are not quite do not quite reflect well on the house. So I just want to introduce to you for some remarks my very dear friend Betty Poria.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. It is true, Pat and I have forged a lovely relationship which belies the point that people think we all are enemies and don't like each other. And I have to start by saying this Women's Caucus Sexual Assault Working Group is very much reflective of that. Everyone here works together for the same purpose. And I also have to give great thanks to Representative Tricia Foley-Bouvier and Representative Lori Ehrlich for having headed up this movement. So, Tricia, thank you. And the Lieutenant Governor's sexual assault group that she spoke about is also amazing. And I'm so happy to see so many of you here. And I have to tell you personally how, some of these things that maybe haven't come into your life, you haven't thought about. I raised 3 sons, and so when I sent them off to college, I really wasn't concerned about their safety because I knew that being strong men as they were, they could take care of themselves. But my oldest grandchild is a beautiful, gorgeous 18-year-old girl, and she is going to college next year. And I have to tell you that I lay awake at night worrying about her when she gets into an unfamiliar environment and being protected and really quite innocent throughout her life. It's scary, and I know it's scary for her parents too. So when we speak about the sexual assault on college campuses, it really comes home to me. And I know all of us want to do everything we can to make a difference for this scourge on women. We're wearing denim today, which I have to tell you was a personal challenge for me because I didn't own denim. But it all...
And this is what you come up with. Can you show off the back of your jacket, please?
But it all turned out well because I got to go on a major shopping spree. So I want to thank you all for Denim Day. It was a success. But it symbolizes the fact that if you are not dressed well, you certainly are not inviting any kind of an assault. But I would like to thank, as was mentioned earlier, no matter how you are dressed or where you are not inviting sexual assault under any circumstances. And we need to emphasize that. So our act concerning sexual violence on particularly higher education campuses, I just want to mention some of the priorities that are in some of the main points of this bill. And this is giving me some measure of comfort as I think about my granddaughter going off. The public safety officer of the Board of Higher Education is to review all campus safety policies. We are requiring campus websites to include information about resources available to any sexual assault victim. We require sexual assault policies to be emailed to all students each semester, because the worst thing is that the students wouldn't be familiar with what is available to them. Campuses must establish a memorandum of agreement with sexual assault crisis services. We are requiring an option for anonymous reporting and the designation of trained confidential advisors for students to report to, which will make it somewhat easier for a woman to come forward. Mandatory sexual violence training for all students and employees. That's amazing and huge. Students will be exposed to information about dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, primary prevention, and awareness training. Schools must report the number of sexual violence incidents on their campuses to the Department of Higher Ed and the Department of Public Health and the Committee on Higher Ed. I think all of those provisions will go a long way to help us deal with what's happening on our college campuses today. And the more we talk about it and the more we bring it forward, the more it will be exposed. And so all of you are a voice for this, and hopefully you will go out and speak in all your areas of familiarity about this issue and this program, and especially with all of our young women leaving home for the first time and going off on their own. So thank you very, very much, and thank you, Tricia.
So now it's my pleasure to introduce one of our brand new members. And don't be fooled by the fact that I say she's a brand new member and was sworn in January. She has already made an impact on the House of Representatives. Natalie has some amazing experiences that I'm not going to tell you because I think it will be more impactful if she tells you, but I'd like to, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Representative Natalie Higgins.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on such a rainy day. I just want to thank everyone who made today possible. I have been working in the sexual violence prevention movement for the past decade, my entire adult life. I trained as a counselor at Every Woman's Center, which is now the Center for Women and Community at UMass Amherst, when I was a freshman in college. And I wish I had a better story of how I fell into this, but I literally stumbled into this work. I was looking for community service, and counseling skills seemed like a really great skill set to add to my resume. So, and I'm a woman, Every Woman's Center made a lot of sense. So I went through a training, many hours, and learned about sexual violence in our communities and learned the statistics. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the time they turn 18. 1 in 5 college-aged women between the ages of 18 and 24 will experience rape or attempted rape. And I was blown away. Here was this thing that I didn't realize existed in our communities. And what distressed me even more was once I completed that training, so many of my loved ones started disclosing to me. They had been holding this trauma quietly because they didn't have a safe person to talk to. And that was a lot for me to take in, but I knew I was doing the right kind of work. I knew I was making an impact. And I had the opportunity to work on getting a harassment prevention order passed into law for sexual violence survivors, because until 2009, if you didn't have an intimate partner relationship, if you weren't dating or related to the person who perpetrated against you, you couldn't get a restraining order until 2009. So I knew that this was an area that I really wanted to work in, and I sought out to figure out how to do this. And I'm really thankful that the executive director of Pathways for Change, the first rape crisis center to hire me, is here in the audience. So I started as a volunteer. It was 2009 when I graduated. Rape crisis centers and domestic violence centers were struggling. They had had massive budget cuts and were really, they lost most of their staff, and they were heavily relying on volunteers. So I started volunteering, doing hotline work and medical and legal advocacy for survivors, and then there was an opening for a teen counselor. And in my early 20s, and I love talking about social media and talking to kids, and it was a really great fit. And so I spent the next year and a half counseling teen survivors and learning just how resilient survivors are. And I think that's important to talk about. These are survivors of sexual assault. They are in our communities, and they are surviving every day dealing with their trauma. And I also did prevention education in 47 cities and towns all throughout central Massachusetts, and got to see kind of how are we talking about sexual violence in our communities to our young adults. And hardest job I will ever have, this job is tough, but talking about alcohol and consent to 15-year-old boys, that takes the cake. But really unbelievably important work. So I had been doing this work and knew that I wanted to figure out, we have these laws to protect our community, but for so many of my teens, the legal system was not a place for them to get the kind of closure, the kind of resolution that they needed, that they weren't reporting it to the police, or if they were being turned away. That I wanted to figure out, how do we make policy and the law work better? How do we make it better? So I went to Northeastern Law School and started working. I worked with the Governor's Council to address sexual and domestic violence. I worked in the juvenile court with juvenile offenders. And then around this time, 4 years ago, I was getting ready to start the domestic violence clinic. It was the weekend before. I was about to start back with my classes at Northeastern, and I was sexually assaulted. I was 24. I was at a place where I had been many times. It was one of my safest places, and my whole world shattered. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I did this work. I knew how this worked. I supported people. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I should have been able to prevent it. I should have been able to do something. And then it brings me back to the theme of Denim Day. There's no excuse and never an invitation to sexually assault someone. And I am so thankful that I had been working in this movement for 6 years, because I had the skill set, I had the tools, I knew how to seek support and surround myself with everything I needed and how to attack this head on so that I could thrive. Speaking to the campus sexual assault bill, why this is so important, the first people that I disclosed to at Northeastern ran the domestic violence clinic, and they counseled me to take a break. Don't continue with law school. Just focus on yourself right now. And we know that stability in survivors' lives make a difference, allows them to continue to go forward. And luckily, I was able to convince them to let me to continue the domestic violence clinic. And I worked for the next 3 months helping survivors of sexual and domestic violence get restraining orders, and it was the best therapy I could possibly have had. But with that, my whole world had changed. It became, can I get 5 minutes of the day that I don't think about what happened? Can I get to 15 minutes? Can I get through a day? And I'm happy to say that I'm in a much better place, and there are weeks that go by that I don't think about it. But I will smell something, I will see something, I will hear something that triggers me and brings it back. And that's something that I know I'm gonna be dealing with for the rest of my life, and I know that so many people in our communities are dealing with every single day. And so I'm so thankful to be a new member in the legislature, to be able to represent the great city of Leominster, and to work with all of my colleagues behind me to eradicate sexual violence in our communities. That we need to come together, we need to have more conversations like this, we need to talk about sexual violence and how we can end this, because it's only gonna happen if we end the silence. So I want to thank you all for coming here and working together to make sure that everyone understands in our community there is no excuse and never an invitation to sexually assault another community member. Thank you so much.
Just the fact that Natalie can now talk about it is something that many victims still have a very difficult time doing. So personally, we want to thank you, because having one among us who can make that strong a statement is amazing. And I'm but very sorry that you had to experience it in order to be such an advocate. Well, everyone has a role to play. Whether you are, whether you care about safety, whether you tell people about these experiences, the respect that should be demanded for every person. We need to teach our children, not only our young girls, but our young men, and our young men that they have a responsibility to respect women or to respect anyone. So the Women's Caucus would like to thank you for coming here today. We'd like you to go out and make sure that you continue to talk about it. We cannot hide the fact that there is domestic violence in our communities, because if we hide it, then victims won't come forward. If we don't stand up and talk about it and make sure that a bright light is shined on this horrible, horrible issue, then people are going to think that it's okay not to report, and they're absolutely going to think it's okay to let it go. So please, use your position in the community, use your position in your families to make sure that everybody is aware and that you can be that listening ear if necessary. So thank you all, ladies and gentlemen.